Another week, another long-awaited sequel in a beloved series. But this one is different, because this is obviously Mario and Luigi Brothership. But it's also the first time in the channel's history that we've done console capture. Yay! Do not ask me about the workarounds my brother and I had to come up with to get this working consistently. So if it looks jank, that's why. That out of the way, it's time for a history lesson. The Mario and Luigi series is Nintendo's third collective stab at making Mario RPG games. The first being the Super Mario RPG, and the second being the Paper Mario series. The Mario and Luigi games are my favorite take on this concept for two reasons: the inclusion of Luigi as a prominent character, and a denser and wackier sense of humor. That combined with great timing-based combat and a selection of amazing music by longtime goated composer Yoko Shimomura, known for her work on Kingdom Hearts, Final Fantasy, Live Alive, the Mana series, and even Street Fighter Goddamn 2. Yeah, that woman has a resume. Anyways, they were developed by Alpha Dream on all of Nintendo's handhelds from the Game Boy Advance to the 3DS from 2002 until 2019, where they declared bankruptcy. Since then, we've had nothing unless you played Paper Jam, which was a crossover with Paper Mario and was okay, and the remakes of the first and third games of the series, both of which were decent. And then, around a few months ago, we got confirmation of a new one of these, Mario and Luigi Brothership. The first game in the series to be developed for home consoles with the Nintendo Switch was coming out on November 7th, developed by Acquire no less, the developers of the Octopath Traveler games and some members of Alpha Dream. I've played up until the end of the first major dungeon, so here's what I think of it so far. And I'm once again asking you to please subscribe if you haven't already, it helps the channel out. And with that out of the way, let's do this. Mario and Luigi Brothership takes place on the dismantled continent of Concordia, after the brothers and other residents of the Mushroom Kingdom get sucked into a magic portal. From there, they meet various denizens of Concordia and proceed to stitch the continent back together after it's torn apart into a group of islands. And that's the basic story setup. So far, there seems to be a lot more storytelling that's in line with a lot of console-based JRPGs compared to the tech limitations of Nintendo's handhelds. There's some impressive pre-rendered videos for cutscenes, mainly for the big story bits and the reconnecting of the island so far, and it looks really good. As well as it also focusing on some of the newer characters pretty well, the main ones so far being Snoutlet and Connie. Snoutlet is this weird pig-looking fairy thing whose main running gag is that he's not a pig despite describing things like a pig. He fits the role of exposition fairy that Starlo did in the past couple games. I'm not sure how that feels so far, but Snoutlet's growing on me.
That'll do, pig. That'll do.
Connie is an apprentice botanist who specializes in the World Tree-style giant trees and plant life that supply the rest of Concordia with the power it needs. The story so far seems to be just as much her journey as it is Mario and Luigi's, between her coming into her own as a botanist and trying to figure out what happened to her mentor. And as a result of that, the story in Brothership deals a lot with the connections to others and how maintaining those is important. And while that is a good thing to have, that doesn't mean that the humor takes a back seat. If anything, this amplifies it at times because there's instances and jokes that, thanks to the writing and the new engine so far, had me giving a hearty chuckle. There's a lot of wordplay focused on electricity, and while it doesn't match my love for cold and ice-related puns, there's a lot of good stuff in there. While the story and writing in Brothership aren't my favorite, that would belong to Bowser's Inside Story because Bowser was just so entertaining as a character in that one, on top of it also reestablishing why he's the main bad guy to begin with, it's shaping up decent. I'd say it's around Superstar Saga. It's good. I like it. Some of the changes to gameplay are things I'm less than keen on, however. The standard gameplay of the Mario and Luigi games has usually been the brothers going through an overworld location to solve puzzles, engage in combat, etc. But a lot of the changes to the overworld structure have me scratching my head so far. A good chunk of said overworld exploration is done through navigating a seed map and picking the currents to follow to discover islands, and then use the telescope to turn into a cannon and shoot Mario and Luigi over to said island. It has a nice running gag where Mario always sticks the landing and Luigi just beefs it. Every time. It never gets old as someone who also tends to beef it when living his everyday life. And a lot of my overworld problems come in the form of the implementation of Luigi himself. In the previous games, Luigi was a fully playable character who could do things that helped progress. Now, he's just an NPC that follows you around to the point where it's not even worth jumping with both him and Mario at the same time, because he just jumps in place and has to rubber band back. And this ties into the new mechanic of Luigi logic. This is meant to evoke the Luigi's Mansion series, where the main gameplay is focused on puzzle solving, and while that is a good thing to emulate, it doesn't work out in practice sometimes. There are puzzles where you need to engage with the Luigi logic in a way that it also requires precise timing, and the AI that Luigi uses does not care about that and just trucks through. It made for a somewhat frustrating experience so far. I do like the exploration abilities though. Those make getting around the world pretty good and leads to some more elaborate level design. Funnily enough, I think Luigi logic works much better in combat. In both boss fights so far, there are instances where you need to use Luigi's logic to stun them, so that way they can take massive amounts of damage. It's really cool. Brothership also introduces side quests. These exist to flesh out the characters of Concordia, and also get you new gear, extra coins, and experience. I like them, and the game goes out of its way to tell you that they are limited in duration, but you have enough time to do them at your own pace. To loop back, that mention of Luigi logic felt as good as a jumping on point for combat, so let's talk combat. Combat in Mario and Luigi Brothership is the same formula that the other games in the series have. This is to say that you encounter enemies in the overworld and then engage them in turn-based combat. The main wrinkle is that all of your attacks are timing-based, and correctly hitting the A button for Mario or the B button for Luigi increases your damage. This also goes for defense, which means you could theoretically go the entire game without taking a hit. Different enemies have different tells and animations to fake you out, and it's an incredibly good combat system at its core. But there is one thing I need to talk about that gets on my nerves. Not a major systemic issue, but more pet peeve. When you go into the menus in this series, you hit A for Mario and B for Luigi. It cuts back on the one button does everything syndrome that some games have. Plus, it was just really smart, you know? Here, they changed it so that Luigi's menus in combat are A instead of B. Is this a thing to adapt to? Yes. Have I? Also yes. Did it throw off 2 decades of muscle memory and was enough of an inconvenience to get mentioned in this script? You bet your sweet bippy it did. Especially early on. Another thing I noticed is that the way stats work is different now. Not the way they're spread out, because Mario is still focused on hitting harder with jump and hammer attacks, whereas Luigi's more focused on being bulkier stat-wise and getting in lucky hits, which can let him spread status effects more easily compared to Mario. That's still in there, and it works well. It's that the numbers overall seem higher. By the end of my time with the first 10 or so hours, I was hitting for like upwards of 50 to 60 damage, and Brothers' attacks were getting into the triple digits. This is a stark contrast to the early levels in previous games where it was way less, and all the enemies are bulkier to compensate. I'm not complaining, it feels weird as all. But the Brothers' attacks are great though. There are some new ones and some old ones with a neat spin. The only ones I have so far are the red and green shells, and they've reworked them for different roles. The red shell now focuses on kicking the shell back and forth between Mario and Luigi for a big single target hit, and the green shell is now an AoE attack that has you kicking the shell between different enemies for a huge final attack that hits all enemies at once. I adore this change because on top of looking awesome, they fixed my biggest problem with the shells in that they kinda just did the same thing before, but now they're just different in the best way. And I saw some of the new Brothers attacks, and sweet Christmas, I need them. I need to explain what a Brothers attack is for the uninitiated. They're team-up moves that Mario and Luigi can do for Brothers points, or BP, the series equivalent of mana. They're flashy as all get out, and they do great at boss fights. If I had to sum them up, it'd be with this quirky little meme video I found. Overall, the gameplay changes in Brothership aren't bad. I'm just a little weirded out by them because I'm a creature of habit and I haven't warmed up to them yet. I haven't seen the battle plugs yet, but those look like they'll be a fun change to combat. It still plays well, but there's some stuff I gotta talk about that impacts that from a tech standpoint real fast. As we all know, Mario and Luigi Brothership is the first game in the series to run on home console hardware since it's being released on the Switch, and the game looks goddamn gorgeous. A lot of this has to do with the entire game running in Unreal Engine 4. The art style Brothership goes for emulates the promotional artwork that a lot of the games in the series past has used, and it does so to great effect. It's vibrant and expressive and colorful, and it might just be the best looking game I've played this year. However, This comes at the cost of there being some hitches and slowdown in the docked mode in the overworld, but it happens infrequently. Not enough to be a deal breaker, but enough that it leads to it getting mentioned in this section. Interestingly enough, none of these issues happen in handheld mode or in combat, so that's weird. But if there's one thing I like, is the animations that Mario and Luigi do have in combat. There's a much greater emphasis on teamwork in their standard attack animations this time around, with them setting each other up for their jump and hammer attacks in a great way. This also works best for the Luigi logic stuff in the boss fights I mentioned earlier. Luigi takes the lead and Mario gets in there and supports his brother because the relationship is the best. And then there's the music. While I like a lot of it, it has a predominantly island adventure vibe going on. It's apparent that Yoko Shimomura is not doing the music this go around, and it's seen by the lack of dramatic violins and piano that have become her trademark in recent years. Based on the time I've spent on it, Mario and Luigi Brothership is shaping up to be a fine entry in the series. And while the changes they've made aren't bad, they aren't to my liking as of yet. Here's hoping that things smooth out by the end of it, because what's here is one of the most enjoyable games I've played in 2024. I bet it's choppy waters, but it's shaping up to be smooth sailing.